motion. I think this Anthony was a natural. He might be the greatest athlete of all time. He has such a beautiful swing.
Welcome back to part 3 of this From the File series, in which we feature Rasmus Neergaard-Petersen. If you haven't already watched the first 2 episodes in the series, be sure to check them out. In the first part, we talked about his bio and where he's from. The second part, we got into the analysis, and this is the final video in the series in which we'll finish the swing analysis and review the takeaways. At the end of the last part, we discussed Rasmus's takeaway and how his swing has some classic elements despite having all the markings of a modern textbook golf swing. Let's pick up right where we left off and continue talking about the backswing. Remember, I wanted you to focus on the takeaway and how it changed throughout the years. Now, I'd like to explain a little bit about why this is very important. Also, remember how I mentioned it's very difficult to use the terms open and closed when speaking about the club face, because those are relative terms. Because of the unique way in which Rasmus takes it back, it might appear that he has a shut club face. This is an illusion. What's important to note is whether or not Rasmus's club is square or open or shut relative to his body. And because Rasmus has a passive right arm, he doesn't have a lot of wrist hinge or arm hinge in the backswing, it will appear to be shut when it actually is in fact a very neutral club face. This is a relatively minor point, but it's worth mentioning because it's crucial in understanding how all the pieces fit together. Perhaps a simpler way to explain this is looking at the club face in context rather than just looking at angles. To explain this point, here are 2 images of both Rasmus and Justin Thomas. Notice the blue lines, they represent the club face. Justin Thomas's is pointing more towards the sky, and Rasmus's is pointed more on an angle towards the ground. Even though Justin Thomas's club face might appear to be more open, it is actually neutral. And even though Rasmus's club face might appear to be more shut, it is also neutral. How is this possible? Well, since Justin Thomas's right arm is bending and he's also using rotation in his arms in the takeaway, the club face is naturally going to roll open a little bit more. And because Rasmus does not have these things, he has a very passive right arm and a higher right shoulder, the club face appears to be more shut, even though in both cases they are actually neutral. This is important because the way the club face is orientated in the first part of the backswing can be a bit confusing for some people. It is common to believe that the club face is only to be measured in relation to the ground, but in fact, it's more nuanced than that. All right, here's where it gets really interesting, because Rasmus's right arm is very passive in the takeaway. The benefit of taking the club back in this way is that he has a very, very easy set of the club at the top. He does not have to work very hard to set the club. This is why Rasmus's swing has the free-flowing, efficient look. It looks like it's smooth, but extremely powerful. This is because the club sets itself. He doesn't need to rely on his wrists. He doesn't need to rely on his arms. The club is carried to the top of the backswing with the momentum and weight of the club head. Once you nail the takeaway and take the club back with the body instead of the hands and arms, the rest of the backswing is pretty much automatic. This is evidenced by the fact that Rasmus's backswing is very long, especially compared to modern players and the way that many people are taught. I'm sure you have all heard before that you should not take the club back past parallel. Rasmus breaks this rule. Taking the club past parallel is something that's frequently seen in power hitters, especially on the long drive tour, but it's also something that's very traditional. Bobby Jones, Sam Snead, and even Phil Mickelson, it's something that he credits to his longevity, swinging the club head in this way. This is a great element to copy from Rasmus's swing and something that you could try out on your own swing. But if you don't take the club back in the way that Rasmus takes it back, with the body, the hips, the bigger muscles, it's going to be a lot more difficult to make the club go past parallel. Now, because of the delayed wrist set and delayed hinge of the club in Rasmus's swing, he has a very pronounced transition and change of direction at the top. Notice the red lines denote the club in the backswing, and the green lines denote the club in the through swing. And you can just see how much more shallow the green line is compared to the red line. This is technically very sound and something that a lot of great players do, but the change in direction that Rasmus has is just really nice. So I know technically his swing is really good, but that change in direction is really, really, really cool. So I like that a lot about his swing. It's cool to watch. Now here's a big misconception I'd like to cover, and it's something that I've noticed in the golf world, but very few people I've seen mention it, if any at all. And that has to do with forward shaft lean. I'm sure you've heard of forward shaft lean. It's a term that's thrown around all the time in golf, but the reality is that forward shaft lean and its importance, I think, are greatly over-exaggerated. If forward shaft lean at impact was the only thing that mattered for good ball striking, then I think logically there would be a correlation between the best ball strikers on tour and the ones who have the most forward shaft lean, but in fact, there are many examples to the contrary. Here's a graphic to illustrate my point. Now, Xander Schauffele is usually cited as a golfer who has a significant amount of forward shaft lean at impact, but if you take a closer look, you'll notice that the shaft has not deviated a significant amount from straight up and down. So even though it might appear he has a significant amount of forward shaft lean, the truth is that it's really not that much on a standard shot. Rasmus's swing is unique in that it appears that he doesn't have any shaft lean at impact really at all. But compared to Xander Schauffele, whom many say has a lot of forward shaft lean, the difference is really not that much. Now, because of the way that Rasmus's head is positioned, maybe slightly more forward at impact compared to other players, or what is pretty standard, this creates some interesting release conditions. One thing I really like about Rasmus's swing is just the stability of the club face throughout the release. I don't think this is a result of him holding off a club face, but rather the culmination or end result of a very good golf swing. I think part of the reason why Rasmus is such a good ball striker and iron player is because his impact conditions allow his body to follow the ball throughout the release. It's very reminiscent of another player who's doing very well at the current time. All right, that just about wraps up our feature of Rasmus Neergaard-Petersen in the first inaugural episode of From the Files. I think Rasmus was a great golfer to analyze. You can really learn a lot from his game and his swing especially. I think he has a great potential going forward. He's already just around 50 in world ranking as of February of 2026 and is expected to keep getting better in terms of rankings and overall golf game. One of the more interesting things I've noted in my analysis of Rasmus is that he is an exceptional ball striker, and that's indicated in the graphic I have to the left here. What's also interesting is he's a very good driver of the golf ball. At the current time, he's lacking in short game and putting, but being that those are the two easiest things to improve, I would not be surprised if Rasmus very quickly find success on the PGA Tour this season. And what's also interesting, and something I noted, is that even though Rasmus is not leading any tour in terms of distance, his club head speed is just behind Rory McIlroy, only fractions behind him. So that's something to note and means he has a very high ceiling for distance. That's about all I have. I thank you for watching. If you made it this far, I hope you enjoyed the whole series. And if you haven't watched part 1 and 2, go back and watch those. And by the way, feel free to leave a comment down below about predictions for Rasmus this upcoming season and also what you'd like to see more of. There are a lot of videos planned in the future you're not going to want to miss, so make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thank you for watching.